Hey everyone, Steve Richard. Hope you're enjoying the account-based virtual workshop. I was asked by my friend Mike Taylor to do a presentation today all about how can you measure success for your account-based sales development effort. We're going to go deep on metrics, gang, so it's going to be some fun. Let's take a look at what those key metrics are going to be that you should watch in your organization. I'm going to throw a lot of different things at you. And I'm going to challenge you, I'm going to be your guide along the way to help identify what are those metrics that you should be about, what are those metrics you should be measuring. My name is Steve Richard. I've worked with over 100 companies in my day as a sales trainer. I've hung up my sales training hat. I had a lot of fun doing it. And over, if you count the keynotes and all the rest of it, 4,000 sales development reps, hundreds of sales development managers over the years. So I've had a chance to see a lot of this. I'll be your guide for as we go through these metrics. And really, there's only two things you need to know about me. The first thing you need to know about me is probably like many of you, family man. And here are my 4 kids. Oldest is age 8, and that's why I get up in the morning, just like probably a lot of you. The other thing you need to know about me is I love seeing salespeople get better. It's my passion. It comes from a deep-rooted place for me because previously in my career, I was a failing salesperson. And it was difficult seeing yourself on the bottom of the leaderboard. What I learned along the way is you have to go and study what the best people do and what the best people do differently. That's what this is all about, is what are the best sales development managers do differently when they're taking an account-based approach, an account-based model, and what are those metrics that they're looking at. So let's talk about the problem. The problem with sales development metrics is that, and I'm going to frame this from the perspective of an airplane pilot. My dad was a pilot, and if you look at this cockpit, flying a plane is challenging enough when you have all of these metrics and gauges and dashboards at your disposal. Flying that plane is challenging when you can even see what's going on. But the reality in many organizations is people don't have visibility into the metrics. They're not measuring the right things perhaps, or maybe they're not measuring anything at all. And about the difference of how intimidating this is, where all of those screens and all of those metrics are blocked out. How could you even land the plane when you're doing this? But this, again, is what's happening. Many, many, many sales development managers that I work with are flying blind. And what I mean by flying blind is they say, well, we measure dials, we measure talk time, and we measure appointments sometimes, but usually it's just opportunities. So they're measuring the fact that there's a selling opportunity that ensues. There are all sorts of metrics that happen. That would be like an airplane pilot saying, I measure, before I'm going to take off, and then I measure when I'm up at cruising altitude. Well, what about all the things that happen in the way, along the way in the takeoff? Lots and lots of things that you've got to keep your eye on if you want to land that plane safely or get that plane up to cruising altitude safely. So let's look at those for sales development. So this is a representative list, guys. This is not an exhaustive list, but it gives you a sense for all the things that you can measure. Now, we're not going to talk so much about the conversion rates and the conversion percentages. We're going to go look at that in a minute. But what we're talking about here are activities, objectives, and results with a nod to cracking the sales management code. So a raw activity metric, of course, is going to be something like a dial, or if you're sending an email, customer, generic, in-mails. If you're doing an account-based approach, account-based sales development, we've seen the advent of GIFs and handwritten notes are starting to make a comeback again. That is a really powerful tool when used effectively, is the handwritten note to get someone's interest and attention and get them to get back to you. It's going to convert at a higher rate. Something that's not on here, faxes. Ken Krogh and I have talked about that, voicemails. But we're also seeing people measuring things like touch frequency. There's a lot of research from Topo and the Bridge Group and others that's saying that it's not simply that there's one silver bullet touch, it's the combination of all of the touches, the touch frequency along the way, and making sure that people are following that right series of touches, of calls, emails, voicemails, GIFs, whatever it might be. And in fact, that's why Engagio is sponsoring this event, because they're building a whole platform all around that. And also looking at who provided those. So the percentage of touches to a most wanted account that's not by an SDR, but somebody else in the organization. Now, here are some things that are really interesting that I don't see most companies measure. Things like the number of contacts that you're adding, and that ABSD is account-based sales development, the number of contacts you're adding to your account-based sales development list, direct lines, pre-call research. The fact that you're building a list, what we find is the list can get stale over time. So what a healthy list is going to look like if you're taking an account-based approach is you want to see that there is a healthy culling of organizations from the list and people from the list, and then there's a healthy adding of new people to the list. So your list is a dynamic organism. It doesn't sit there static for a month. It should be changing every day. You should be adding, sometimes 5, 10 contacts per day. It depends on what your frequency is and how many you're going to have, how many touches you can get out there, and how much time you want to spend on each one doing research. Then the other big one that I don't see a lot of people measuring is the conversations with the prospects. And these could be phone, they could be LinkedIn, in-person, email. Well, how do you measure an email conversation? Here's the answer. I'm going to give a nod to Katie Azuma, who's now at Infor, a friend of mine. She came up with this. It was brilliant. 2 round trips. If you email a prospect, your sales development rep emails a prospect and then gets a response, that's 1 round trip. That's not a conversation, right? You can email and they say not interested, but it doesn't mean anything. They're not really even probably processing what you do. They're not thinking. Instead, it's if you email them back and then you get another response with some sort of meaningful information. 2 round trips is a conversation. So measuring conversation is so important. And then obviously all the pipeline that comes from that. So the first meeting scheduled, the first meetings that occur, really ultimately the meetings that occur and the opportunities that ensue are what the sales development job's all about. I've seen a lot of people over the years who can schedule a lot of meetings, but then 50, 60, 70% of those meetings fall off. That's not ultimately what we're driving towards. It's the fact that we're having substantial scheduled conversations. So you can think about the world as unscheduled conversations that you're measuring that lead to scheduled conversations. And that's a different metric, and you should measure those differently. And when you do, you can start to understand what the batting average looks like of the rep between the unscheduled calls. Those are the chances at the plate to take a swing to maybe get a hit, and when you get a hit, that means you get a scheduled meeting that occurs along the way, and then that goes to pipeline and deals. Important for everyone to realize is that the definitions matter a lot, and this is Serious Decisions has a framework. These are not all Serious Decisions terms. They talk about inquiries and MQLs, which are marketing qualified leads, sales accepted leads, and then sales qualified leads. But the interesting thing about this is, in working with many organizations over the years, we have heard an alphabet soup of acronyms of all sorts of different things. So a TQL is a totally qualified lead. But then I've also heard a TQO, which is a totally qualified opportunity, or an SQO is a sales qualified opportunity. So here's what I recommend. You either really buy into Serious Decisions and you buy into their definitions and you have total clarity around that, or you have complete understanding and consistency on what your definitions are going to look like at your company. And that will definitely vary from one company to the next. So definitions matter, and what happens I see in a lot of these meetings is you get the head of marketing together, head of sales development, head of sales, and they're talking about things. And they don't even realize they're miscommunicating, because one of them is talking about an MQL and they think it's one thing, and another one's talking about an MQL and they think it's another thing entirely. It's completely different. And as a result, they never really come to any agreement on what they should do to improve the funnel. So definitions matter. This leads to really the most important point of this whole talk today, which is using your activity metrics, or I used to call them process metrics. Process metrics or activity metrics as a diagnostic tool. You cannot control the result. It is not possible to control the result in sales development, and anything like that. What you can control is you can control the inputs. You can control the activity metrics, the things that you can do that will impact and affect the result in a positive way. So when things aren't going well, the way I think about this is it's almost like an auto mechanic. Think of yourself, if you're a sales development manager, sales manager, you're an auto mechanic, and you're trying to figure out, why is the car not running well? It's almost like those guys, the car guys on talk radio there, that people call in and try to stump them with what's going on with the car by describing what's going on. Think of it that way. So you're going to look under the hood, and right now we're going to take a look at some metrics. We're going to look under the hood, and we're going to start to try to figure out, what are these metrics telling us? What's the relationship of these metrics? What's the story that they convey? There's a story that comes from activity metrics in the sales development, account-based sales development model. All right, so this funky old Google Doc right here, believe it or not, this is real. This is from my my outsourcing business, Vorsight, which is was still around today. This is from years and years ago, probably about 5-10 years ago. It's now something that Funnel Clarity teaches, my sales training business, Funnel Clarity, which is why I gave them a nod in the lower right corner there. So let's look at what we're seeing here. You've got 18 different sales development reps, and we're tracking their metrics Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Now, just like the airplane, in order to land the airplane, you only want to look at the critical few metrics that land the plane. And Ken Krogh tells a wonderful story about this fighter pilot in Vietnam, and he always came back safely. And they asked him later, why? What was it? And he said, because I knew there were 4 gauges, and if I just kept my eye on those 4 gauges, I was going to make it home okay. That's what you need to identify in your sales development effort. What are those 4 gauges that you should be looking at? Now, in our world, our being Vorsight's world, we look at the dials. We're a very calling and phone-centric operation, so we spend a little less time on emails. But if you're more email-centric, you spend more time on emails. If you're an Aaron Ross shop, great, but more emails. In our world, dials, pitch means conversations. So pitch means we had a conversation and we quote-unquote pitched the prospect. New means we added a new contact to the list. And then meetings. So if we take a look at this one that was blown out here, the yellow box, on May 8th, 2013. Boy, this is like the dark ages. For InsideSales.com was around that time. Because it's funny, back then, the reason a lot of these say 100 is our old phone system stopped counting calls after 100. So people would just write 100 for their dials and they're manually reporting them. How funny is that? Anyway, so what you're looking at here, if you look at that group of people, one person there on that day had 76 dials, had 8 conversations, got 2 meetings. So the conversion rate, the batting average of conversation to meeting is 25%. Good, not great, pretty good. But then look at that, didn't add anybody new to their list, to their prospect list. Now the next person down did 100 dials, 2 conversations, okay, got 1 meeting, so their batting average is really good, 500, you know, they 50%, they got 1 meeting out of 2 conversations. And then look what they also did, they added 13 new people to their list. Adding new people to a list is a key indicator of future success. Future indicator of what's going to happen tomorrow. It's a leading indicator of future success. I know if someone has a lot of people today, they're probably going to have a good day tomorrow, which is what that second person did and then what that 4th person did, which indicates they're probably going to have a good day tomorrow. Now, the third person is interesting, or I should say next week too. Third person is interesting. They got 3 meetings. That's a great day. That's a hat trick, we call it. Really good day. They got 3 meetings out of 3 conversations, so they batted 1,000. Every conversation they converted it. However, there's something I don't like. It makes me nervous. They had 2 new prospects added to their list. So now that they're harvesting people off of their list by getting meetings, they got to backfill it with something else. So if I'm their manager, I'm going to be looking at that metric. So let's take this analysis, let's take this exercise to the next place. This is one of my favorite exercises in the world. It's an exercise of reading process metrics as a diagnostic tool. And I've done it with a bunch, probably about 50 sales development or hundreds, maybe even 100 sales development managers over the years. So let's look at this together and think about it and try to understand the story it's telling. Now, I'll give you a little hint. In prospecting and in sales development, account-based sales development, there are different personas. Now, if you're going for a true account-based model, you're probably not going to be as heavy on the dialing persona, which is Fred. Is probably going to be a bit more targeted calling than that, but it could be quite high. But the personas are, there's the cowboy or the cowgirl, librarian. The librarians research all day. Cowboys shoot from the hip, ask questions later. Then there is the sniper shooter. The sniper shooter is the informed cowboy. That's the individual who they have the magic combination of doing a right amount of activity, but the activity they do is very well informed, and they can get away with doing a little less activity with being so much more informed that it's just their conversion rates are just better. And then finally, there is the new to sales development individual that's a little bit nervous and a little bit phone shy, but has a lot of potential. We see those as the personas. So let's take a look at these metrics. Who's who? Mike, okay? Mike adding lots of people to his list, dialing the phone about the right amount of time. Oh boy, but not having a lot of conversations. What does that tell us? That doesn't tell us that he needs help with his conversations because he converted 3 of them to meetings out of 11. That's pretty good. That tells us he needs help with his list. He's probably building his list the wrong way. He's putting the wrong types of people on the list. Maybe he's not getting direct lines for people. Maybe he's not researching in advance. Those types of things. If you look at Kate, okay, Kate is our sniper shooter. She's the one who, you know, a little bit lower number of dials. And she's not adding a ton of new people, but boy, when she does, she converts them. Her conversion rate of conversations to appointments is outstanding. Even though she has a lower number of dials, it doesn't hurt her conversations too much. She's having far more conversations than Mike is with far fewer dials because she's such a good sniper shooter. She knows how to get to people the right way at the right times. She's really the model citizen. Now, the inexperienced manager will look at these metrics and say, Kate needs to dial more. How would Kate feel if you said, Kate, go dial more? She would be like, you kidding me? I'm number 1, and you're telling me to dial the phone more? You know, buzz off, scram. So you got to be careful of that as a manager. Instead, we should be talking about career path for Kate, succession planning. How can we get her into the next job and get that next person moved up into another part of the organization? Because she's someone we want to have around. Now here's Fred. I love Fred. Fred is our cowboy. 650 dials, shooting from all directions, right? Adding tons of new people to his list, probably misinformed, probably not adding the right people. His conversation to appointment conversion rate is the thing I'm concerned about. He can talk to people, but who is he talking to, first of all? And secondly, what is he saying? That's really what I'm concerned about. He's probably got a problem with his lead-in. If you have 22 conversations and get 4 appointments, that's not a very good batting average, which indicates, because really when we're dialed in, we should be talking to 3 people to get 1 meeting. You know, he's talking to far more than that. I'd love to understand what he's saying in the calls. We got to go to the game film. We got to go to the game tape of his conversations. That's where the answer is going to lie. Now remember, that's different than Mike. For Mike, if I'm going to double click to understand what's going on, I'm going to look at his list. His conversations are not that bad. I'm not too worried about that yet. I'm more interested in his list. Why is he making so many dials and having so few conversations? The answer is probably on his hot list someplace. We could figure it out. Maybe it's stale. Maybe he doesn't have enough direct lines or that kind of stuff. But for Fred, the answer is probably in his conversations. He probably sounds super salesy. He probably goes, hey, Janet, this is Fred calling. How's it going? You know, he'll say weird things like that turn people off, and he just can't convert many of them. And he's fighting uphill all the way because people are rejecting a salesperson just out of principle. And then finally you have Anne. Anne, right? Anne is the one that has all the potential in the world. She's adding a lot of people to her list, but probably doing all the right things, working hard, really wants to be good. Does a really good job of converting her conversations. Doesn't have enough. Why? Because she's not dialing the phone enough. Who does Anne want to be like? Who's her role model? It's Kate. It's Kate, because Kate's a sniper shooter. So I want to pair Anne with Kate to learn from Kate so how she can improve. And really ultimately on this list, it's kind of funny, kind of ironic, because usually sales development managers walk around and say, dial the phone more, dial. But in this case, the only one who actually does need to dial the phone more is Anne. She's it. She really does. And if you sat her down and say, hey, Anne, how's it going? Good. What's going on? You know, let's look at these metrics together. You look at them, you say, you take a look, what do you see? And she's going to go, I'm not dialing the phone enough. I know that. Okay, well, what's going on? Well, she's nervous. She's scared. She's new. She's trying to figure it out. Let her get that confidence boost by sitting with Kate. So this is a dial shop. You could do the same thing, because I know account-based sales development is frequently about giving a present or a bottle of wine or a gift or handwritten notes or having interactions live. All sorts of things. We had a commercial broker today that did a very account-based approach with us. They read an article about our company's fast growth, ExecVision's fast growth. They showed up at our door with 10 pizzas, and all 10 of their brokers. Now, you know, very nice gesture. We're not going to change our broker. We love you, Nate Krill. If you hear this, we love you, Nate. But really nice gesture. Again, that's something they have to measure. So if they're going to show up with 10 pizzas, that's one of their activities. They're going to have a funnel. If they do that once, it's not going to work. If they do that 100 times, I want to see how do those 100 convert into clients relative to 100 cold calls, relative to 100 handwritten notes, relative to 100 of something else, and who delivers that message. That's another key to the account-based approach, is who's delivering that message, because maybe if it's their CEO, it's a higher percentage than if it's one of their salespeople. So there's lots of things you can measure. The key to the whole thing, account-based sales development, is you want to find out what are the critical few metrics for your business, not for any other business, for your business, for your account-based approach. Like I said, if you're Aaron Ross, it's going to be very different, the types of things that you're going to measure. What are those things you're going to measure? And then ultimately, you've got to keep your eyes on those gauges like the fighter pilot, because if you don't, you can crash. All right, hope that was helpful. Final point here is we do this call camp. Would love to have you join the call camp. Submit a call for free. You get your call scored and coached by experts for free. So everyone, go ahead and submit a call, a sales call recording, and we'll analyze that at call camp. Have a great day.